Hi, welcome back to Wild Speculations. I'm Daniel.
I'm Scott.
This week we talk about Critical Role Campaign 2, Episode 134, The Streets of the Forgotten.
Yep.
They seemed a little punch drunk this episode.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I thought about, I was like, what adjective am I going to use to describe it? And that's the one that came to me first. I think it's pretty apt.
Yeah.
Sort of all over the place, all episode. Not that it was a bad episode, it was just that was the energy around the table.
Yeah.
We open where we left off in the tunnel, debating, chasing them down, clearing the debris.
Yeah. Taliesin brings up the rest that I mentioned last week. Veth asks, what about, the Rangers? Did we get, was there any warning? And the look on Travis's face and how he answers it, he's acting like a little kid when they know they did something wrong and they don't want to admit it, but they know they have to. Well, yeah, there was. And then he doubles down on his justification of trying to buy more time.
Yep. Which on Talks, he admitted to essentially feeling he needed to make a captain's choice and made a choice and didn't bother asking for any further information, how far away they were, to even determine whether that attack would delay them enough.
Yeah.
Like he had no idea. And Matt again shows that he's unwilling to hit them with the hard consequences.
Yeah.
He runs a consequential game. So what the players does matter, but he doesn't hit them as hard as he could. And
yeah. He didn't slaughter the Rangers.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know. I think there's like less than 5% chance that it would have played out that way. But Matt gave it to him.
I don't doubt the outcome. Because Rangers are really good at getting away. They can get in and get out. That's sort of what they do. And Dagon is not beholden in any ideological way to the Dynasty, the Mighty Nine, or anything. Yeah. So he's not going to fight until death.
True.
So, like, I buy that they fight until one or two are down, or half the party's bloodied, and then they just GTFO.
Yeah.
And the Tomb Takers aren't going to give chase because all they care about is getting to their goal. So if these guys hit them and run, they're not going to go after them. Yeah. Yeah, Rose. And so I ran across a video over the weekend, safety tools, and they were using Critical Role as an example of them, and how much of the discussion around them seems to be predicated on the fact that they must be overt and present. And this person was pointing out how, because they're friends, they've been friends for a long time, they've played together a long time, that they don't have the overt safety tool signals, but she went through and basically highlighted all these things. It was a almost 44-minute video. But anyway, after watching that video and what happened on Talks with Travis saying, I didn't even think, he was very upset, and he's like, I didn't even think that I ordered Dagon to his death. Like, that didn't cross my mind.
Yeah. And
So,
I don't doubt that it didn't cross Travis's mind.
But I think in light
Ford's
of that...
mind, I'm not so sure. Travis's mind, I don't think.
In light of that, I think Matt wasn't going to hit Travis with, you got everybody killed.
Yeah.
You got a couple of them killed. Dagon was really hurt. But is that enough? Is it Washington's first command level of disaster for him to learn from?
Yeah.
Like, that's sort of what was in my head. And I don't know that it is. I don't think...
I don't think it is. I figure with what happened this week that a third to half of them got away, but were badly wounded.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And the one bit of GMing that I wanted to talk about was the clearing of the tunnels. It was arguably time sensitive. The player certainly felt some pressure to get it done quickly. And Matt just kind of threw numbers out. And he asked for just a strength check, or athletics, I think is what he asked for.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk about that sequence, because I think there's some stuff there.
Yeah. Well, he cuts it way down using Essex Graviturgy abilities.
Yeah.
Which we didn't take into account last week when we talked about clearing. And in hindsight, we should have, because we saw him use those when they created the clay casket for Not to become Veth, and how heavy it was, and Essex just used his gravitation abilities and carried it like it was nothing.
Yeah, it's fair. But, so, and this gets to what I wanted to talk about, in that he should have let them choose the skill that they wanted.
Yeah, done a regular skills challenge.
And like, not necessarily like some, like, because my go-to in that situation when you're worried about further cave-ins is a strength sleight of hand. Strength for moving the mass, but sleight of hand so you're doing it carefully.
And see, my brain goes to either investigation or nature to
identify
the weak spots and where to pull from.
Yeah. But in either case, to determine the amount of time for a passage, my brain immediately went to a D6 for every success and 2D6 for every failure in minutes.
Okay.
Which I ran the numbers, and on average, what Matt quoted them, like 23, 25 minutes on one, and then like 27 on the next one, would be within that range based on the number of successes and failures they had. So it was just, it kind of made me laugh, because I was like, I should come up with a random way to do this that would be concrete, because Matt was sort of wishy-washy.
Right.
And then later on, they're like, wait, how long have we been? And some of that time got a little...
wibbly-wobbly.
Yeah. And while Matt was not concerned about it, because he knew the Tomb Takers were going to have to take a rest.
Yeah.
Like, he knew they weren't going to get too far ahead.
Yeah, which is another thing, Matt made, whenever he made Aor, I assume he already had this set up, but made it to where it was more than a day. So even going in weekend, like we were worried about, they were going to have a chance to make that up.
Yeah, well, and it also sort of screws them on the Heroes Feast.
Yeah.
Which I have to applaud. from a
Although
design perspective.
I have to say, when they did the Hero's Feast, she says, "Oh, I have one more." She had 2 chalices, so they could do another one.
This is true. This is true. I don't think...
If they do it, it's going to have to be in the morning and use that high-level spell out of that day. Because she used her last one.
Yeah.
So, there is that trade-off, but they can still have that immunity to fear advantage on wisdom saves.
Yeah.
Which, arguably, is huge.
Yeah.
Is
well, because all his psychic stuff is wisdom saves.
Yeah, he's done tons of wisdom saves. A lot of cleric spells are wisdom saves.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about Kree.
You know, immunity to fear is going to be huge. And I would argue that it would be a better use of that spell slot to do the Hero's Feast than to save it for a 7th level spiritual weapon or whatever she's going to do with it.
Flame Strike.
Yeah.
Which Flame Strike's not going to do much against Lucian either, so...
Right.
You make a good point.
My argument would be go ahead and do the Hero's Feast. Waste that large spell slot. You've still got Caleb. You've still got Caduceus.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've still got Path to the Grave, Divine Smite if they ever pull off that combo. You still have the Sentinel Babes.
Yeah.
So.
And fewer targets.
Yeah.
Which is the big victory out of their...
Yeah, which is another strike against Flame Strike, if you want to be honest.
Because they'll be all interspersed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, ideally, the more people you can fit, enemies you can fit into Flame Strike, the better.
Yeah.
So the fact that they've already taken out 60% of the group, that makes it 60% less effective. I mean, easier to get both of them in.
Yeah.
But overall to the whole party, you're doing less damage.
Yeah.
And you're running a higher risk of damaging your own party.
Yeah, for sure. We had the Mausoleum Temptation.
Mm-hmm.
Where they're tracking the blood spatter.
Where Ashley gets the push the button crown.
Yes.
You're the new push the button person.
And this episode was an odd one because most of the best parts of the episode were not in the episode, as it were.
Yeah.
They were not in universe. They were around the table.
I mean, that interaction just made me want Yasha and Ford to go off scouting more often by themselves.
Yes. 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 We're talking about the different pairings that have happened, and this one they sort of hung a wreath on the fact that Veth and Bo are now the investigation duo.
Yeah, okay, so that meta joke, season 2 / spin-off series because Jester dies. Is that foreshadowing? Does Veth think Jester's gonna die?
Well, Jester certainly thinks Jester is going to die. And she is certainly willing to do so.
Yeah. However, she's got at least 3 people in the group not willing to let her die.
Yes. But she's also a virgin, ?
Yeah.
Presumably, if she's never kissed anyone until Ford was giving her mouth to mouth, I mean... So in a horror film situation, does that increase or decrease her survivability?
Depends on the director. And we still have a long rest to go. That, when you think you're going to die, end of the world type situation, things may happen.
It's fair. That was one of the nice things happening in this episode, is the interplay between Bo and Yasha.
Mm-hmm.
In campaign 1, we arguably had more romances going on.
Yes.
But
more overt romances.
Yeah. but even those were not particularly easy and open with the affectional.
Yeah.
They always, the characters sort of kept it out of the other characters' view for the most part.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting.
So on the topic of relationships, one thing that I noticed, Jester skips to the creator. No, I don't skip. I, go carefully. Caleb immediately says, "I'll go with her."
Yeah.
Beth, Caleb's got it. We're good. Immediately, I go too. Ford. Sense a little tension there, character-wise, not player-wise.
Yeah. For sure.
Then again, through talks, we've established Caleb's bisexuality.
Yeah.
99% sure, total 100% headcanon. Astrid Eowulf and him were a thing. Because he mentions, I could have had Astrid, Eowulf, Essek, and Jester all,
Yeah.
What about Forrester Gast? How about a throuple?
I mean,
Ford would probably be resistant, but...
Yeah, probably.
I think he could be convinced. He's a low enough wisdom, he can be talked into it. Anyway, that's what I want to see happen. I want to see the throuple.
Yeah. I don't think that will happen.
I don't either, but I wanted to.
Fair enough.
When you started Widow Jest, you didn't think it would happen, and it got a lot closer than you ever thought.
That's the truth. But the new season, it rose that, and that's sort of my stance on the throuple is, okay, Widow Jest is part of that. Okay. But yeah, our new couple, Veth and Bo, discover Lucian and Kree's trail.
Yes.
2 dead creatures.
That Kree sliced up with her swords. I don't see well, guys.
You
keep having me scout, but I'm just letting you know now. I don't see things well.
Sam's commitments to bits, I sometimes admit I don't have appreciation for, but that one this episode, I appreciated it very much.
Yeah,
because everything has made sense. This is good. The sex monsters, as they call them. And that Matt lets it drop hints to them. There's another one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to decide if that one got away or was drawn to that combat.
I think that's the one that appeared in the combat.
Yeah, well, for sure, that's the one that appeared when they eventually had the encounter. But I mean, in the scheme of how
in
fight
the
with
Lucian,
them.
No,
Yeah.
I
was it
don't
drawn
think
to the combat after?
I think it came upon the combat after the fact.
Okay.
And was waiting to see. And then once Bo and Veth showed up, started tracking them.
Yeah. We got a funny bit where Matt asks Liam to make a concentration check for his ritual spell.
Yes.
Because Jester won't be quiet.
And insists on talking to him every time he does a ritual. Not every time, but lately it seems like it.
Yeah. And Matt reiterates what we already knew. because Caduceus had cast Detect Magic and already knew that the robe was not magical.
Yep.
And
But it looks good on Yasha.
I have a sneaking suspicion that Yasha would not have been targeted by that tower.
I was just going to ask you that because I had the same suspicion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that robe her wearing, I think she probably had enough of it on. And if they had tried that, if, you know, I mean, and I could see it happening because she's, you know, devotee, scion, avatar, whatever of the Storm Lord. If she had gone through and it didn't hit her.
Well, no, that's not why. The robe is the primary reason why. And we probably,
well, yes,
arguably there's evidence because her and Bo went in. And Charlie told him that if you're with somebody, it won't hit you. And they got the ionization of the room.
Yeah.
But it didn't hit them. Not that they seem to have narrated that they got close, close.
Yeah, but that's a gray area. But yeah, no, I agree 100% with you.
Yeah. But after they talk Yasha down from the precipice of going into the mausoleum, they go to the amphitheater / forum / senate / coliseum. In my head, it's a forum.
Yes.
Or a senate floor.
Yeah, that's what I was picturing, like a Roman senate.
Yeah.
Before they get there, though, while Beth and Bo are off and they're talking, they do the head trick with the talking head.
Oh, yes. The first speaker thing, yeah. With
Typhel. And Caduceus attempts to lie again.
Yeah, well, act.
Yes. You know, and
which reminded me of Galaxy Quest.
I mean, it's easier to lie to dead people than living people.
Yeah.
Arguably, that's just across the board.
It's fair.
But yeah, has to do it because asking questions that Kree should know as Kree.
Yeah, as he was asking, they were leading up to that, and as he was asking it, I was like, "No, you need to frame it. I got separated from Lucian. I don't remember exactly how."
Yeah.
Boom, boom, and then you ask those questions that he. But I mean, 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
But we got separated in the fall. I don't know what happened.
Yeah. You died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was just and then right when he's about to get caught, he just decomposes the head. Other question real quick, as they were debating about which head to talk to, they kept calling Otis a mage, and I think they misunderstood the spell. Because we've talked about Otis having been an Order of the Profane Blood Hunter.
Yeah.
And
which is closer to a warlock than a...
Right. Well, pattern after the warlock. But I think that they're thinking Otis is smarter. Well, I mean, blood hunters are intelligence-based.
Yeah.
With the latest update, the 2020 update, they switched from wisdom to intelligence, so arguably still makes them an intelligent person. But how much information is the Otis head going to be able to give? Because
I don't think they bother talking to any of them anymore.
Well, my question was because, you know, and yes, a crossbow bolt is less messy than a gunshot. But when you do a projectile in the mouth, it tends to ruin that area. And part of the spell is they do have to have the part that can talk, you know?
I hadn't considered that, but he's let them talk to basically skulls before.
Right, but if it doesn't have the mandible, if that got busted somehow, like, which is...
My understanding from Sam's description is he put the bolt
Okay.
in the mountain.
And that's where I wasn't sure. I could see it like that, but I could also see it and just having seen those kind of wounds. Usually there's not much left of that area.
Yeah.
And like I said, now granted, crossbow
Guns
bolts do
versus-
less damage than guns, but
Yeah.
I grew up in mortuaries, so it's fine.
Yeah. But I hadn't considered that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't think they're going to talk to either of those other two. I don't think they have anything to gain by it. Well, okay. I'm fairly certain they have nothing to gain by it. They still might do it. Because that's what Taliesin does.
I think they may, just to try to find out more about, because they asked about the eyes. If they ask about the cognosa specifically, they may get something from one of them.
But there's no point in asking the underlings.
No, you're right.
Like that's what I say. There's no. You are correct in the reasoning they will use to cast the spell.
I am not arguing should they. I'm arguing will they.
Correct. You win. Yes. But we had a really good 1-2 punch when they get to the forum.
Yes.
Caleb casting tongues,
Mm-hmm.
and then Caduceus speaking with presumably Brashar's secretariat.
Yeah.
Or a functionary of the chamber.
Yep.
And we didn't talk about it on the show, really. We talked about it before.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked about it on Twitter a little bit, my theory about the domes. And I sort of went in a more Pollyanna kind of way, that these were people that the gods protected.
Okay.
For whatever reason. And I think it may be not so nice. With the guy, because after rewatching it and I was thinking about it, he says that Brashar was one of the architects of their ruin. And one of the reasons why the gods smote them. Which got me thinking about the mechanics of resurrection in D&D. And Exandria specifically.
Okay.
And what if these domes were not a way to preserve these people's souls from hell or the abyss? It was to ensure they never went anywhere. That is their afterlife, and they are not getting out.
Yeah.
There's no planar quest that anyone can go on to go to any plane to get their soul.
Yeah.
There's no trying to true resurrect them because their souls are trapped in those bubbles.
Yeah. Or it could be like, cryogenic freezing. So that later on, someone finds it, can dispel it, like a long-term gentle repose.
Well, that presumes that you take Caleb's view that there was some attempt to save themselves, and I don't think it was.
Well, when they ask the head or the body who's stood against this, who tried to look around, all these people were here to try that.
Yeah.
So.
Which is why, and they repeated it. It failed. And I started thinking about it. The timeline of events of the destruction of Aor. I think every person was dead before the city fell.
Okay.
based on what we've seen.
Yeah.
Which kind of is an interesting potential. And I kind of hope, maybe through Dunamancy or something, I don't know, something, that we get a more concrete vision. Sort of like when Raistlin and Caramon go and see the destruction of Ishtar.
Yeah.
I kind of hope we get something like that with Aor. Whether we will or not, I don't know. So yeah, my theory has changed a little bit. So I thought at first it was maybe these were secret worshippers of the gods, and the gods were protecting their souls from hell. But now I think it's to ensure that they never come up again. Like, you are too dangerous to exist, you will be taken out of existence.
Yeah.
So, and that to me rings more true.
Yeah, I can see that. Kind of almost a better version of what Yusa did to Halas.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm also more convinced that Liam has a lot of the answers, or a lot of background in his email.
Yeah. I am too. I'm wondering if he remembers.
I don't think he does.
Yeah.
It was 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Thereabouts? I don't think he does. I also am not sure how extensive that email would have been.
Yeah.
Matt seemed to indicate he was going to lay a heavy one on him.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of information in there. How much of it is Aor in general, and how much of it affects the story right now proper? Who knows?
Yeah.
But either way, I'm sure it was heavy, and I'm sure if he goes back and rereads that email, Liam, if you're watching, or intern, if you want to mention it to him, you know, that, I mean, he's got keen mind.
Yeah.
And it's been over a month, though.
Yeah.
But arguably, he should remember he read something about it.
Yes, that's true.
And he's still got the book.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Maybe after they kill the Tomb Takers, there will be a moment to dig in archaeologically and figure out and hit those notes.
I think once we're done with this Aor/Tomb Takers arc, I have a feeling we'll see like a 3-6 month, doubtful, but maybe even a year downtime, like we did about this time in campaign 1.
The downtime doesn't happen until they save Yusa.
Okay, I can see that too.
But I separate the rescue of Yusa from the Tomb Taker.
Yes, and I can see that and agree with that. Strictly because right now, especially with losing Luke and the family scene at the Blooming Grove, there's 2 characters that potentially need that downtime to be with family if they're going, especially if they're going to continue adventuring with the 9.
Yeah.
And I can see them doing that downtime so that they can have that break, have that relapse with their family, and then be ready for the next thing when whoever is like, hey, can you come? I need you.
Or when Ruidus cracks.
Yeah.
And the Tarrasque rises
I think when we're done with the immediate threats, we're going to see a downtime spacing.
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Provided that this isn't the end of the campaign.
Yeah. Veth decides, hey, I'm going to repair this Aormaton. Because she has the power source from the one that they first ran across in the first Threshold Crest room. And brings it back. And man, I got such heavy Ben vibes from Treasure Planet.
Yes.
That as the scene is progressing, my brain was trying to overwrite Matt's performance with Martin Short. It's like, no, that's not what he's going for. Damn, is it close?
Yeah, no, I was right there with you. I was thinking the same thing. I was straight up. And I love Treasure. Underrated movie. Yeah. One of the most underrated animated movies.
Yeah.
One of the best, period, animated movies.
Yeah, right on that cusp between 2D and 3D animation. But yeah. Caduceus names it Charlie. Because, of course, Taliesin, if he's choosing a name, it has to become a C.
No, it's better than Dodie.
Which kind of makes me wonder if she got a peek at the book that Pumat was reading. Or if that's how she's rationalizing it. But yeah, that's funny. He tells them he needs to get to the Genesis Ward.
Yep. That's where they can repair him fully.
Yeah. Which I don't think the Genesis Ward is there. Or not much of it is anymore. Because I think the Genesis Ward is where they were when they burned that forest. And they found the lab.
Okay.
Which was miles away.
I can see that.
And it was guarded by automatons.
Yeah.
So.
And hunters.
Yeah.
Who aren't hunters.
So yeah, we'll see. After that, they are back on the trail and discover which way they went. I started to doubt that they were on the right trail, but Matt does make the point to tell them they do find some blood. So, yes, the Tomb Takers went this way.
Yeah.
And we have the Globe of Invulnerability.
Yep.
Cast from the staff. And them all huddling and going through the room. Monsters either side.
And some of the players getting a first-time real perspective of how crowded they are in Liamon's tiny hut. It's called tiny for a reason.
Yes. Up to 10. You're 3 away from max. Yeah. But Bo stuns the creatures. Ford ends up alone. Caleb and Essek both get wrecked.
Yep.
And Jester with her hand axe.
And Divine Strikes.
Yes. We've been waiting for it.
Yep. And we've been reminding, we've been saying, you know, yeah, I mean, it's not her thing really, but when you're out of spell slots, you're out of spell slots.
Well, and when the creatures you're fighting are immune to radiant necrotic, and that's
what your spell slots do.
5/8 of your profile.
Yeah.
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 And she got a kill saving Ford with it. So I am hoping, like,
and Ford goes Lex Luthor.
now see, my brain immediately went to Powder. And I was like, I got into on some art stuff on Twitter. I was like, I am waiting for the color corrected Powder images. Someone just goes in and paints him green.
Add some tusks. Yes, I like that. My brain went Lex Luthor because we all know. But I mean, Lex Luthor lost all his hair due to kryptonite radiation. He's losing all his hair due to magic radiation.
Yeah.
It's apt.
I think most of those effects that do that kind of thing on the table do come back.
Yeah.
So it's not
I think he just loses it and then it grows back naturally.
Although, unless there's a second line to that effect that says after you take a long rest, all of your hair is replaced by feathers.
Oh god, no! I'm just what's his name? What's his name from the old Battlestar Galactica? In the later seasons, there was the guy with the black and white feathers on its head, bird guy. Or no, not Battlestar Galactica, Buck Rogers.
Okay, I was like,
my bad. It's been a while since I've watched either of them. We're talking like since I was a teenager.
Baltimore? No, he never had feathers.
No, sorry. It's been since I was a teenager since I watched either of the old versions of either of those shows.
Yes.
But Buck Rogers, in the, I think, third episode, they introduced the hot guy. And I forget his name, but he had and it looked like the, cheesy 70s, 80s, like just boom, and it's black and white feathers. And
yeah. Huh.
It was a bird person. And you saying that just makes me...
Yeah. Veth describes herself as the cat meme lady. The woman arguing with the cat.
Yep.
And after the battle, they decide that they're going to rest. Because Caleb and Veth need a long rest. Because they didn't even take one.
Yeah.
Gesture scries on Kree. And she sees them taking a rest.
Which is smart. Scrying on Kree instead of Lucian.
Yes.
Which we've discussed, which they've discussed. Finally, they actually do.
Yes. Which seems to make it more likely to go through, but he still seems to have, he saw it.
Yeah, he's still...
And she even says, I think he was performing for me.
Yeah.
And...
Well, that's just like when Ford uses see invisibility. It doesn't matter who they're scrying on, he's going to see the orb.
Yeah. And one of the things... It's very quick off on this. Again, it's one of the side things where this episode was more heavy on the side things. Liam asks Matt, do I see a similar thing as when I was the ape? And Matt says, yes. And everyone at the table's like, what? Wait, and And he just leans back.
Yep.
Do you think that's because of his eyes? And he's seeing Lucian looking back?
I do. I think it's the eyes.
Why do you think it's him and not also Bo? Because he's an Arcanist?
Probably. I think he's... Well... Yeah, I think it's probably because he's trained in Arcana. Bo is not.
That's true.
Because both are trained in perception. Both arguably have a feat that makes them better at picking up on things. Keen mind versus observant.
Yeah.
Both of them have 2 eyes. So it's either the fact that he's trained in Arcana, so it's a little more obvious to him, where she just has her +4 intelligence.
Yeah.
Or, and I don't think this is it, but it's the only other possible explanation I can think of, it's because of the time she spent in the Happy Fun Ball. Because that was a compressed time, so she technically hasn't had the eyes as long as he's had them.
That's true. Interesting. So we might wake up with Caleb with an extra eye, and Bo not.
Right. And I think if that happens, then that's why.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't happen, if neither of them have an extra eye, or they both have a third eye, then it's because of the proficiency training.
Okay.
In my mind.
That's fair.
Because those are the only 2 differences I can think of.
Yeah. We should mention briefly, I guess, the fact Essek doesn't trust Charlie.
Right.
And thinks that it was a very bad idea for them to wake it up, and probably a worse idea to repair it.
Yeah.
Do you... trying to think of something to equate it. And the only thing I can think of is the droids that Han and Leia get from Lando to watch the twins, or all 3 kids, I guess, eventually.
Yeah.
Where they look like protocol droids for the most part, but they're actually
assassin droids.
Deadly war droids, yeah.
Yeah.
That's sort of the vibe I get from Charlie.
Yeah. Kind of a HK-47 vibe, but better at hiding it.
Yeah, I guess. Or maybe IG-11 in Mandalorian after he's reprogrammed. It's like, that thing's a killer. And Essek is essentially Din. He's like, that thing's a killer.
Yeah.
We need to not have this thing around.
Yeah.
No, it's reprogrammed. It's a nurse droid now. No. So, we'll see. And arguably, his performance as Charlie is closer to Taika Waititi than Martin Short. So, IG may be closer. Lucian, we learn, thinks he's saving the Somnova.
Mm-hmm.
That he's going to go there and he's going to bring them to heal and focus them, where currently they are unfocused, he thinks.
Yeah.
I think that is inaccurate.
I think that's the typical complex of people who fall into the trap that he has fallen.
Yes.
Has dove into.
Yes. As someone who plays characters who do that, yes. I'll trust your judgment on such things. But I loved Matt using. I don't know what to call it. The community's saying for Lucian, "Long may he reign." I mean, it was something that Taliesin said in the episode.
Yeah, well, it was something that Molly used one time. When they were all in the hotel and he ordered the guy and the girl sex worker and came in with food, naked. I'm your god, long may I reign.
Yeah. I love Matt using that in this instance. Right before the voices come in and we end the episode.
Yep.
So good. And a lot of lessons to be learned in giving worship where perhaps you should not.
Yeah.
And also a nice tie back to Molly, because I think Matt has identified a few things to try to encourage the players to see bits of Molly in Lucian.
Yeah, and well, you know, like Lucian said, Molly was an aspect of him.
Yeah. That's
gone now, but still there's going to be overlap.
Yeah. And that may be...
And for all we know, the long may he reign thing was...
a bit of Lucian that remained
with Molly.
Yeah, I think that's how
Matt
is playing it.
Yeah. I agree.
So last week we talked about my survival red flags.
Yep.
And I wanted to devote a few minutes this episode to some green flags, for lack of a better terminology, that I saw. This episode specifically.
Okay.
And the main one was they were focus firing down their enemies.
Yep.
And they chose what they perceived to be the weaker of the two to do it first. And then the big one threatening their artillery. So that's the weak one, kill it. It's the one we have advantage on right now. It's the one we're most likely to hit and do damage, and all the list of things that you want. Everyone's focusing on this. Ford ends up going off alone. And, this thing's here. There's another one. And for 2 rounds, he's like, there's another one.
Yeah.
And everyone ignored him. And they focused on protecting the artillery and the clerics.
Yep.
And I was just like, I mean, so good.
Yeah.
And I have to give them even more credit because it was essentially against orders. Ford was basically calling them for help.
Yeah.
And they ignored him. And they said, we're going to do this.
Caleb's the leader. Ask Beth.
I mean...
he's only the captain at sea.
That's true. I was just trying to think if you were to make them all chess pieces. Caleb would be the king. I think you have to make Ford queen. Because he has the power and mobility. Distant strike. I think...
Josh and Bo are the rooks?
Yeah. Yeah. And Veth... Knight, maybe?
Knight.
Because she's always attacking from odd angles.
Caduceus and
Bishop.
Chester as well?
Yeah. That's where I would put him.
Okay.
Yeah. But, yeah. So they had to protect the king.
Long may he reign. Just to bring it full circle on you.
Good one. Good one.
Yeah, and I think arguably that's the first time they've, I would call it fighting cohesively as a unit, not a smattering of pairs or individuals.
We are all bang.
We are
that
all
one's down.
for one.
That one's down.
Yep.
Then that one. Yeah. That's the first time where the whole team has come together and done that.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to bring it up, because gotta be real.
That's a big moment in a party.
Yeah.
And that's something that your players could have played together forever. But new campaign, it takes time for characters, and that's something
for
that
players to learn their new abilities and for each of them to understand how each.
And it's true, because even as the characters, people take a minute to form a cohesive unit with other people.
Yeah.
It's something that's a very realistic thing in D&D or role-playing games in general. Is let's figure out how we work together.
Yeah.
Because I could sit there and be like, we've all played for years. You do this, I do this. Because I know the mechanics, or the mechanics, and you say that, or Alex or whoever. But that's not combat as role playing. That's not role playing.
Yeah.
That's wargaming.
Yeah.
Which, nothing wrong with that if that's your thing. But and the cast has said this too of Critical Role. The characters are aspects of you, they're extensions of you, and exploring those extensions takes time, and how those interact with each other takes time. So
yeah. And well, I was gonna do. I thought for a second about discussing Yasha pulling the axe and tossing it back to Jester, being a bonus action.
I'm okay with that. I would have made Jester make either a dex save or an acrobatics check to catch it, rather than just saying, "Hey, you caught it."
I mean, she has a very good dex.
Oh yeah, she has a great, and I don't think I wouldn't have made the DC overly hard.
Yeah,
and I think she probably would have caught it.
Yeah, but just roll for just to be sure.
Just for
I mean, it's safer for her to have to bend over where she is, or to go back a couple feet, than to run up to the monster anyway. So yeah, either way that you did it, Yasha's efforts would still have paid dividends.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I would have done it whereas if she failed, it just landed at her feet in her square.
Yeah.
Unless it was a 1, a natural 1, then maybe it's 10 feet away.
Yeah.
In a random direction.
Yeah. Yeah, I also want to compliment Ashley on, because even though she got flustered doing some of the math, she remembered to use Savage Attacker.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't pay the dividends she was hoping. She rolled the exact same thing, but like she's remembering all these things now.
Yeah.
And yeah. And I kind of want to give the MVP to Laura.
Yeah.
Her scrying, her keeping the people mostly on task. Except for the one time that Ford's like, shouldn't we be saving the world, when they're talking about the sexual exploits of these monsters' corpses?
Well, but when it came to the characters discussing the plan, she's the one that kept them on the plan and kept the plan option straight for everybody.
Yeah.
And she's the one that saved Ford's ass.
Yeah.
And
their dice love saving each other.
Yeah.
If someone's down or about to be down, there's usually a natural 20 coming.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that they're consistent. And
I love the irony of
the
Well,
D&D
not really.
Beyond excitement.
Well, that too. Not necessarily irony, but the just parallelism of when Caduceus was doing the Speak with Dead and doing the Deceptions. Or was it doing the Deceptions? There was a time he rolled a 1 and then a 20.
Yeah.
Perceptions back to back. It reminded me of just Sunday when I was doing stealth. Had advantage, so canceled out my disadvantage because of armor. Rolled a 1. Rolled a 20.
Yep. Anyway, that's all for this week. We will see you guys next week, where hopefully we will discuss the death of Lucian and the saving of the world. See you guys.